Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Eczema Podcast. Today is our very first relationship edition. So, the first time that I actually filmed a video with my husband was 3 months after we got married back in 2014. So, it's been how long? Like 8 months or so?
8 months.
I mean, 8 years,
Yeah.
8 years of
Years.
marriage. And we now have two kids, which is this little guy that you see on my lap. If you're
That's a long 8 months. 2 kids in 8 months.
we have Emmanuel here. And when we first filmed our relationship video, the first time we had no kids. So we were fresh, we were new, and now we're 8 years later, two kids, and just us and two tired parents. Yeah, so I'm really excited to be here because, a long time ago we meant to do a relationship podcast like this and share some of our experiences and our journey. And we finally get to do this 8 years later again. Some of the lessons that we've learned, some of the struggles, especially if you or your spouse is going through eczema or topical steroid withdrawals. So yeah, we're here to talk about that and be raw. So anyway, I'm excited to have Brian here. So when I got married, for some of you guys who don't know, my last name only changed by one letter. So people become very confused about what my real last name is. But anyway, so let's go back to when we were first dating. When we were first dating, did I ever have any skin issues?
Oh yeah.
I
You
did.
betcha. Actually, no. When you're first dating, your skin was pretty good.
Yeah.
I would never have known you had eczema at that time. But then about maybe a couple months in, that's when you start to flare up and it's pretty bad.
Yeah. So I remember that when I first met you, that's how I recall it too, is that my skin was clear, and it wasn't until a few months in when we were fresh and dating, which is kind of scary for you, right? Because we were brand new, and then all of a sudden, boom, I looked like a disfigured person, and just like I was like 99% covered in rashes, and it was scary.
You weren't disfigured.
Well, okay. At one point, my naturopath said that it took him 2 months to start to see what my normal face looked like, and so yeah, that's a big part of it. And so yeah, what was it like for you when you first saw me start to have the rashes show up and the eczema? Because it was pretty new to you. Like you've never met anyone who had it in your family or.
When Abby's skin started to flare up, that was a whole new world to me because I've never met anyone that had eczema before. I didn't even know what the word eczema was. So to be introduced to that right on was not to say scary, but it was just foreign to me. And at that time when I met Abby, she had very I don't know if I would say perfect skin, but it was not noticeable anything. Like I wouldn't have been able to notice. But then it went from best to worst kind of thing, right? And all I could think of is just to care for her. I can see that she was going through a really rough time, and so I don't think I ever felt like, oh, like this is disgusting or anything. It was just like, okay, let's help her out. And so even times where she'd come over, we just take care of her, whether it be making clean food for her or helping her clean up or things like that, because you can tell that she was in a very serious state of, I would say, disability.
Yeah, and just to give you some background, I lived on my own for over 10 years, and so every person in my family is in a different country. So when I met Brian, I had no family around. So even when I was working full-time, I never stopped working full-time, even when I felt very severely disabled and I had a lot of rashes everywhere. I kept working, and I remember even going to work was so hard. It was physically painful and difficult to put on clothes. I couldn't cover my rashes even with makeup, and it was just too red and everything hurt. And so to see Brian just like take care of me and his family, it meant the world to me because I didn't have family to do that for me. And I always had to, take care of myself and cook for myself and, do pretty much everything, which was hard when I became very disabled. And I remember it's interesting you said that you were not disgusted by my skin, because that's how I felt when I looked at my skin, was that I felt like I was very disgusted, and I felt that, I just felt like it was like I looked like a monster at times. And I remember covering my legs. It was full of rashes, but one thing that you had said to me was, don't be afraid, you can show me your rashes, and it's okay, let me kiss it. And that was really touching for me. And And even then, I was scared to always show you what my skin looked like.
Yeah. So for a period of time, because we lived like quite far away. Well, it wasn't that far, but so you stayed at my parents' house. We had a room for you, and like every day we would vacuum all the dead skin, or we change your bed sheets practically every day. We cook for you, but because you were on a special diet, we'd have to figure out how to cook for you.
Yeah.
And that was a huge learning curve because it was, well, myself and my parents cooked a lot of Chinese food. And basically a lot of the Chinese food, style of Chinese food that we ate was on the naughty list.
The naughty list.
So like using a lot of sauces, which Abby was like, no, you can't use sauces. No sugars, no soy sauce. Like, oh, then what do we eat? Like rice with nothing? Like you can't even eat rice. So it's really difficult. Like how can we cook for you? And so we had to look up recipes. How do we eat cleanly? How do we, basically, I think we started with like an elimination diet, right?
Yeah.
And so it was a big learning curve for all of us, but we did it because we loved you, and we did it because this is what you needed to heal. Even though we didn't know what was going on, we just did it because we knew that it would be helpful for you. And again, very different thing that we're used to, but we just did it.
And that was really nice because one of my greatest fears was that we were so new at this relationship. So I was like, what if he leaves me? And that was one of my biggest fears, is that I'm gonna scare him, he's gonna run away. And the fact that you stayed with me and never let go, that's actually one of the biggest things I credit to my healing is your support, which I'm very thankful about, and that you never left and that your family also helped. And just to give some background, I only stayed over at his house on weekends because I had to work during the week, and so I was back at my condo downtown, just living by myself and taking care of myself during the week. But during weekends, his family would be so nice to let me in. And I remember one time your mom actually cut my hair for me, and I was so ashamed to actually show her what my skin looked like, because under my bangs and just like my whole face was so red and inflamed, and like the whole thing stung, and I felt really disfigured. So I remember I was really ashamed of when she cut my hair because I was afraid she would see what my skin looked like. And there was something you said, like that I didn't have to be afraid and that she was treating me like a daughter, which I had never really had that type of care before. Well, at least not as an adult, because I lived on my own since I was 18. So I never had that from my own mom, and that was really nice. There are a lot of tough times, like for example, when my naturopath, I remember he said at one point, like, I've been working with you for 2 months already, and for the first time I can see what your real face is starting to look like. So things like that. And then just as a background, like when we first started dating, there was a time when we were supposed to go to Uganda for a missions trip, and we were supposed to travel there. We were doing all the prep and meeting every week with our team, and then I had to drop out of the Uganda trip, and I was so embarrassed that I couldn't even make it. And a big reason was because I was full of rashes. Like I had too many wounds and they were afraid that I could get infected. So I had to drop out of the trip.
Yeah, there's definitely a health issue or a health risk, because with open sores and everything, it would be pretty dangerous, especially if things were not that sanitary over there. So it's a little bit risky, and we made a decision that Abby should drop out.
Yeah, and I remember I kept oozing at that point, and I just couldn't make it. I mean, I was devastated, but you know, that's what had to be done to keep me safe at that time. And I remember that, Brian, you kept getting calls from people in our church, like even the pastors were saying how they were worried about me, and that made me worried about me even more because I was in such a serious condition.
But how did it make you feel that you actually had people that worried about you? In terms of, did you feel like ashamed, or did you feel cared?
Yeah, so this is something that we've talked about before, is like whenever people see the state that I'm actually in, I feel so embarrassed and ashamed that I had to go through it. But at the same time, I also felt that care because I mean, I was on my own, so I haven't really had that from many people, but I feel like it was a bit of both. Yeah. So it was a lot for me to learn to accept help and let others see me in the state that I was in. It was really new for me too. But yeah, so let's move on to our marriage. Because when I was married, I was okay as well. I was worried about my wedding day, but everything turned out okay. But our first, in the beginning of our marriage, we were fine too. Like my skin was okay.
I think so. I think it's really started to get bad again with your pregnancy, right?
Yeah.
Or is it before that?
There was a time when it was like, I think it was like a bit of when I had a really stressful job.
Yes.
Yeah, and I had a really tough boss. Like that caused me a severe flare. But then also in my first pregnancy, first postpartum, that was like the tide just turned and went through a very, very severe flare up at that time.
Yeah. No, it was difficult because on top of, so we were married and home ownership is not easy. So to take care of that on top of a full-time job, I was also doing ministry. I was doing children's ministry at the time. I was also in school at the time. And it was very difficult to handle that on top of now Abby was in a state of disability. And so I had to also help take care of that. So it was very challenging because there's only so many things you can do. I only have a certain capacity, and all my capacity was focused on all those things. And there wasn't a whole lot of time for myself. And that's something I had to learn years later to be able to self-care.
So just for some background, Brian ended up having to do the cooking in the house, like 100% of the cooking. You did all the cleaning. And so at times when I was disabled after giving birth, there were some days I couldn't even hold my kid properly. Like I would be flaking and then like all my flakes would like go on his hair, and then it was just tough. And so I know that for this little guy. So I know like for you, Brian, it was kind of like you felt like a single dad, and because there's just so much that I was limited to.
Oh yeah, no, well, I was single husband.
Yeah.
Because that was even before Cooper was born, and so there's just so many things to take care of. And then soon later we introduced the baby, and that was also very hard too. But at that time, I made the decision to drop a lot of the other responsibilities that I had because I needed to focus on my family. So I had to focus on raising my son, helping Abby, so focusing on my wife, and then also we had to somehow take care of this house too, all at the same time. And Abby only had so much capacity because either just taking care of herself took up so much energy, and then she also had to breastfeed as well at that time. So she didn't have capacity to do anything more than just taking care of herself and taking care of Cooper. And so I had to take care of everything else, and that was very challenging.
But thank goodness for maternity leave, because I wouldn't have been able to go back to my full-time job. And I remember just before I was on maternity leave, I also went on short-term disability leave just because it was too painful. Like I couldn't handle a full-time job physically, and it was too difficult to be there. But yeah, that's when I felt like I lost a lot of my life. But also I want to backtrack a bit and just also thank you, Brian, because of you, like I got my life back, and you helped. Because of your sacrifice, you gave me that freedom and hope to heal and to be where I am now. And so one thing as well one thing when we were dating was that the first time that I realized that I love you is, do you know when that was?
No.
So I made a book one time for Brian, and I put all my journal entries of when I was going through the hard times with my skin. And I wrote one of the things when we first said I love you to each other was when we were in bed, and I was struggling so hard. And I remember being scared, like, how do I know I'm doing the right thing? Like, will I ever heal? Will this ever get better? And one thing you said to me was that I'm never going to leave you, and you're never going to go through this alone. And that's when we also first said I love you to each other. I remember my naturopath said that most people who saw my state would have ran away, and the fact that you stayed and just your selfless care for me and the way you were, just your character, you as a person, I think that's when I first realized that I really, really fell in love with you and who you were and how much you cared. And I was really thankful to have someone like you, which I tell you a lot. And yeah, it's obviously harder with 2 kids right now, but I'm very thankful. And if it wasn't for Brian, I wouldn't be where I am now. So very thankful. Yeah.
Is this like the whole for every great woman there's a great man?
Yeah, I think so.
I guess we've been talking about how hard this was. It was hard, right? But the thing is, it was all worth it, because through all that hard work and getting you through that, I mean, there were still lots of moments of joy and memories made. I mean, we got to, whenever we got to go on so many vacations and various trips, and your skin was better at those times too. So like, we still got to enjoy things, and like, your skin's so much better now.
Yeah.
And so now we got to do things as a family with 2 kids. So it was all worth it. Again, we had to endure a lot of hard times, but things eventually got better. And you know, the reason why I love you is not because of the state of condition you were in. I love you for who you are, and I knew that's still there. And the eczema is not you. That's just a condition that will, at that time, was hopefully temporary, but you got better. And it's been fulfilling to see your journey, and it's very fulfilling to see what you've been able to do, and inspiring to see what you've been able to do despite what you've gone through. But then also, out of that, stand above it, having conquered it, and now being able to help others is truly inspiring.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, because I realized I distanced myself from a lot of people when I was going through it, and I was just afraid to show them what I was going through, and feeling like they would never understand. And yeah, I'm very grateful for you, and all the times you reminded me that we're gonna get through this, that you'll overcome this, even when it looked like a dark cloud. And you know, how I was never sure how would I get from A to B when it looks like I'm 99% covered in rashes. And just the fact that, you know, after my second pregnancy, I healed a lot postpartum, just so much quicker than the first time. It makes me realize that, you know, this healing is possible. I know the process works. That's why we use it to help a lot of other people. But everything you said to me before, like how we're going to get through this, it really came true.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest challenge is, despite just like the physical challenges for you, whereas the mental challenge, because I understood what I couldn't really understand what you're going through, but I knew that it was very just challenging and very depressing, right? And so making sure that I was consistent, making sure that that you can still hold on to hope. And yeah, it's not about just like having a positive outcome, because then that's just denying reality, but understanding that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and that we can get through this. And as long as you had that kind of foundation, or at least, I guess it's kind of like when you're in the deep end of the pool, and if I can at least be that ledge for you to hold on to at least, and not let you go like Kate Winslet did to Leo, and just like help you hold on, and so that you can start to, I don't know, get back on the surface and swim again. Yeah. I thought that was important, and you did learn to help yourself and heal yourself, and yeah, things got better.
Do you want to touch a bit about, to give our listeners and viewers, what it was like to watch me in that depression? Like, what was I like in the worst state that you saw me in? I
think at times you were borderline suicidal.
Yeah, I was very depressed.
Yeah, things like, I remember you telling me there were times where you said like you didn't want to go through this anymore. You didn't want to put me through this anymore. And that was really hard to hear those really raw emotions. And it was tough for me too, because again, to be a support, and then not also for myself to not have the support to put. So like, if I'm holding on to you, who's holding on to me, right? And that I found was really important, to be able to find someone also to hold on to me, so that I would be stronger to hold on to you. Yeah, I just picture slides in cliffhanger. But yeah, did I really answer that question? But I think the key thing is, it was tough. It was tough to see you like that, because I want you to be better, but I have to trust in the process. I have to trust that you will get better, and know that there is hope. And the good thing is that you eventually got better. and we were able to fulfill whatever you were doing, basically.
Right, my first postpartum flare, but yeah, I just really appreciate you, Brian, for sharing. And so what did you do? How did you feel like you could get to the finish line and move on and see? How did you believe when I was like pretty much in that depression and just that state where I was at the end of my rope? How did you know it wouldn't be like this forever?
To be honest, yeah, I didn't. I just had to hope, and I just had to keep pressing on. And it was faith. Faith is believing in something that's not really material, and so that involved a lot of praying, a lot of release to mentors that I had, so I can make sure I got myself right. And then again, they continue to help support you, because a lot of the healing is not on me. I'm just supporting you in your healing journey, and you kind of have to basically heal yourself. But I can set things up and give you the space to heal. So whether it be, okay, maybe you had to do less chores, maybe you needed more time to get ready, maybe you needed to do this, and that was a learning curve for me as well, because I just had to learn on a new schedule, basically. But I provided that opportunities for you, and when you had less anxiety, when you had less stress, that's where we saw some improvements with your skin.
So just to give you an idea, after my first postpartum experience, when I was in a deep flare, Brian was working 9 to 5. He would get home at 6, and then he would have to watch Cooper, our first kid, and then do the chores, help with some of the cooking. And I remember, because I was disabled, one thing you said to me was that, if you want to help out with one thing, what you can do is just put the dishes in the dishwasher. And even such a simple chore, I remember dreading and crying. And the hard thing was I couldn't even look at my skin because it was all rashes and painful to look at, and bringing trauma when I looked at it. So even stretching my arms, doing certain movements would hurt, and putting the dishes in the dishwasher, such a simple task, was tough for me. And not even that, but getting ready would affect you, because it could take me like an hour just to get ready, and that would make us late a lot of times. And that the amount of work and time it took to maintain my skin was so difficult. And I know, Brian, it was tough for you. And so I really thank you that you never gave up and that you were there. And this is just such a raw conversation. I know a lot of spouses go through the same thing, but it's not talked about a lot. So thank you for never giving up on me.
Well, there's light in the tunnel, right? It was all worth it. Again, even though it's hard, doesn't mean it shouldn't be done.
And I really appreciate your beliefs on loyalty and never giving up, because I think if I didn't have you, I would have no one and nothing, because my family's not here.
Well, I'm never going to give you up.
Yeah.
Never going to let you down.
Sounds like it's from a song. I think that's pretty much our story, right? That's pretty much a lot of the ups and downs we went through, summed up in half an hour. There are lots of ups and downs. We went through this for a few years, and my son just started getting. We started introducing solids and noticing some eczema patches starting in him as well. You can see a bit of red. So my husband has also, because he watched me go through the same process, he's had to remind me that we're gonna get through this as well, like just the same way that I got through this. Like I've had to lean on him to tell me that we'll get through this.
Yeah, you had a lot of anxiety because you can kind of see that Manuel's kind of going through a similar stage that you went through. But the thing is, you're good at your job, and I can understand how when it happens kind of to your own kin, it's devastating. It might make you feel like you might not be a good mom, because how can I let this happen to my own child? But again, you have to trust the process. We have to trust that how you've been able to help so many other people, we can do this to our own child.
Yeah.
And so I trust you. I trust that you'll be able to do this, and we will see him get better.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so let's give tips on, someone who's going through it, whether it's like family or caregiver. How do they stay strong? Like how do they get through this? Because it could take a few months or like a few years, like kind of like for us. And so how do they stay strong and believe in this and get through it?
Find whatever spark of joy that there is. What brings you joy? And hold on to that, because that's kind of going to be the thing that kind of fuels you, because things like this could be a little bit depressing, just going through, and just, it's not just depressing, it's a lot of work and it's draining. But when you have something that's joyful to kind of lift you back up, again, that's all just self-care, right? Whether it be go work out, play a video game. That's what I did. I played video games, but at least it was a release. Secondly, I found a mentor. At least someone I can talk to, just to kind of, whether it be vent or anything, that's just a release. Because at times I couldn't really vent to Abby because it would be pretty depressing, right? And I wanted to make sure that she kept her spirits up as much as possible within her state. So it's not to just paint a rosy picture on things and, you know, sugarcoat things, but to really, there's too many things for her to deal with. I need to be able to find someone else that can, at that time, could help, basically, right?
Yeah.
And so just finding someone else who can help when she's not in a state to be able to help, so things like that.
So for you, did you ever fall into depression or lose hope?
I don't think so. Not that time.
Maybe you're just like naturally positive.
Am I?
I don't know. Well, like, just for some background on Brian, like, he's not like the type that's an overthinker. You don't seem to lose hope very easily too. So I don't know. Maybe you're just like really easygoing, and
Done.
you don't have the same. He doesn't have the same anxiety levels I have. Like, whereas I had a lot of childhood trauma, and I kind of bringing that into my skin and my skin journey. Whereas he's not too many highs or lows, whereas I had so many lows in life and through the flares that it caused me a lot of anxiety and just struggles and just wrestling with the depression, which is gone now that my skin has gotten so much better. But before, I was just like in a deep hole. So yeah. And one thing as well was that, like we said in our first video 8 years ago, that there are a few blessings in disguise that we never saw before. So maybe we'll end this on a positive note. One of the things you said before was it taught you to be more creative at cooking.
Oh yeah, it did. So like things I was used to using as ingredients, I had to change them up. And even if you find substitutes, they're still different. Whether it be, let's say, even for soy sauce. Soy sauce has a certain salinity to it, it has a certain taste, but the replacement one is also just, for some reason, a lot saltier. So I had to adjust recipes in that way and things like that. But then even just finding new things to try, because making the same, like even if you have a trusted recipe, making the same thing all the time, it gets boring. So I had to experiment with new vegetables and try new things like gourds and squashes. And I only knew about butternut squash, and now I had tried acorn squash, this squash, that squash.
And it's like before we had unlimited items to eat, and then when I first went on my first diet to help my skin get better, we were so limited in terms of what we could eat. Yeah, so I'm really thankful for that. Any other hidden blessings in disguise? I think for me is like learning a lot of lessons that, like, hey, I can overcome this, and it's tough, but if this didn't happen, I wouldn't have a story to share and lift others up who are in the same position. I remember I once promised God that if he healed me, I would share my story with the entire world. And I think this is one of those stories. And like, if it wasn't for you, I would never have a family. I would never know what love and what hope is like, what it's like for someone to care for someone else, as I never really had my own family here. Yeah.
I'd say the blessing in disguise is, well, when things kind of got, I guess, dark, it's about learning how to, again, self-care. And I learned that through Queer Eye.
Like that TV show, Queer Eye.
Yeah, I learned through that. And just how important, because especially what they call them heroes in that show, a lot of them were self-sacrificing people, whether it be taking care of other people all the time or doing stuff for their own business if they're entrepreneurs and things like that. A lot of those heroes didn't take the time to take care of themselves because they were serving all the time. And so that's what I learned through that show. Just, okay, like, you know, sometimes you got to take care of yourself. And I felt kind of like that for Abby, where I was serving her, serving the kids, serving my church, or, you know, serving at my job and things like that. And I didn't really take a whole lot of time for myself. And there's times where I start to burn out. And so learning to take care of myself, like I mentioned before, just finding something to do that elicited joy for me. Again, I'd be finding a video game, or recently I took up kickboxing. And so just finding joy in that, and that was a nice reprieve from, you know, the the stresses of our everyday life, and just to be able to do something for myself, even if it's just something that's small, it's very important. And if I didn't do that, I literally would have burnt out.
Yeah. Your acts of service is your love language, and you never stop serving. Like, you serve at church, serve at work, serve with us, you served at children's ministry. It's a lot. Yeah. People out there as well who are caregivers, or you have a spouse or a caregiver helping you through this. I think we can never thank you enough for saving our lives, for giving back our life, and we really appreciate it. But any last words before we end this today?
Treat yourself.
Like, treat yourself as in take care of yourself?
Basically.
You need to take care of yourself and make sure you're okay.
And it's not just like, again, not the whole taking care of your skin or something. Like, actually do something that's just brings you joy. Really.
I thank you. I've told him before that because of this, you saved my life. Your parents helped save my life as well. And sometimes I don't always have the words to express to thank you guys, but I guess this platform really helps because I'm able to just share how I really feel and how you guys turned my life around. And we've tried filming this in the past before, and I've gotten very emotional. But yeah, thank you. I love you.
Love you too.
Thanks for watching, and you can always reach out to me on social media at Eczema Conquerors. I'm everywhere on YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. Check out the free resources on my website, eczemaconquerors.com, and I look forward to connecting with you there.